Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World Warships for our upgrade and commander build video today, which is going to be looking at the Tier 8 light American cruiser, the Cleveland. And so you can see we have, I think it's just called the Freedom permanent camouflage. I'll take it off here so we can get a better look at the ship without all this, but a great way to express freedom. So I'll just go ahead and pop that off, and then we'll just come back into looking at the ship as we're going to look over multiple things here with Cleveland, her armor, her upgrades, modules, commander skills, so on and so forth. So, with that being said, let's just dive right into it. So what type of ship is the Cleveland? Is she a brawling cruiser? Is she a mid-range cruiser? Is she a long-range cruiser? There's typically the three ways to define a cruiser. Well, Cleveland is a mid-range cruiser, so she has a 9.3 concealment. Usually when I say mid-range at the higher tiers, let's say 8 and up, usually talking around 12 kilometers per se. You want to play around with her concealment, and of course she has a 9-kilometer radar. But she tends to play around key objective areas, so like capture zones. That's really where her strength comes into play, in providing support for your destroyers, teammates, etc. So, I featured the ship yesterday on the EU server, or not yesterday, but maybe a few days previous. And I'll go ahead and link that at the end if you want to see the build in action. But that was in EU, this is on NA. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and dive into it. So let's first talk about her armor scheme. So actually not too far from Helena. Kind of has a similar concept going on here, but we have 25 millimeter across the ship. And then you have the armor belt Citadel armor, 127 millimeter. And then the deck 27, the forward 25. So a little bit maybe more HE resilient across your deck, but you have a large 13 millimeter superstructure. Now we begin to take things away. Similar to Helena, you can see that you have actually the Citadel I think is a bit longer here, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of on the mid underneath the superstructure of Cleveland versus Helena. So if you're running to go for Citadels, you really want to be aiming pretty much just directly underneath the superstructure. You could say it ends from the rear secondary turret to the forward secondary turret. And then it drops down, which is nice, so you don't have this massive Citadel. So I am appreciative for Wargaming and how they worked the armor scheme here. But it is above waterline, so even cruisers can Citadel you. Destroyers get close enough, they can Citadel you. So you just need to be mindful and try to flex angling when possible. The gun frontal plates, 165, which wraps down to a 76, to a 38. And then also on the back. So the sides of these turrets are most vulnerable. Top has 51. So we'll probably be taking main mod 1, main battery mod 1 to help with preventing these, hopefully getting more survivability and not being incapacitated so easily. But first, let's talk about her modules here. So there's no upgrades for her main battery turret. So you have a reload time of 6.5 seconds before anything like Adrenaline Rush or like a top grade gunner would be kicking in here. 180 return time, 18 seconds. Not terrible, but some may prefer a faster turret traverse. HE shell damage, 2,200. Maximum AP shell damage, 3,200. So you do want to be utilizing AP when possible. We'll talk about that when we look at the armament. Your stock hull has 30,600 hit points. So you're going to want to invest in your hull first if you don't have Cleveland yet. This is going to bring you up to 36,900 before we talk about Survivability Expert coming into play here. I do not believe we have that on our current commander, which I've moved around since, so I've put this one on Cleveland in the meantime. Cleveland's cousin, Montpellier, however you want to say that. Maybe I'm saying too much of an accent on that, but and then, of course, going over to gunfire control system stock, it's a bit brutal at tier 8 14.2, but you will eventually be able to invest into 15.6. So that is much, much, much more helpful, especially if you're seeing tier 9s and 10s. In terms of propulsion, 100,000 horsepower, 32.5 knots. With the ceramic flag to add 5% speed, you'll be looking at 34.1 knots. And I believe that's similar to Helena, if I'm not mistaken. In terms of her upgrades, I would recommend taking the main armaments mod 1. This is going to reduce the risk of your main battery becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, main battery survivability plus 50%, main battery repair time negative 20%. Again, your DPM revolves around your main battery guns. You don't have torpedoes, you don't have amazing secondaries, anything like that. So keeping the guns in action is quite beneficial. So I would really recommend that. You know, there are other cruisers that play the AA role better. Like if I wanted an AA build, I would actually go more for like Baltimore, or I'd be using my Rochester, which has really good AA. So I really want to invest in that. Main mod 1, risk of your ship's magazine detonating, -70%. If you're playing randoms, ranked, clan battles, you just want to take Juliet Charlie combat signal, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. Now, in terms of your standard upgrade options here, you have damage control system mod 1 and engine protection. Really, you want to be going for engine protection if you don't have the coal to invest in a special upgrade, which I will talk about in a moment. Risk of your engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated, -20%. Repair time to both of those, -20%. Okay. Otherwise, what I would recommend going for if you want to invest the coal is the surveillance radar modification 1, consumable action time plus 20%. Okay, so when you're looking at this, your radar right now, we have 27 seconds. Okay, so plus that 20%, we would be adding what that would be like, close to 5 seconds, I do believe. I'll check. Yeah, 32.4 seconds. So maybe you get able to get an additional salvo off. You can just click on it here. It's going to take us into Armory. You do get a 25% coupon. I do try to use those every month, but standard cost 17,000 coal, with coupon 12,750. So if you want to build into radar, you can, and then you can just simply demount this and then take it up the line to like what's next? Seattle and Worcester. Okay. So I would recommend this one the most out of all of these. But if you don't want to invest the coal, just do what I do, engine room protection for the time being, because I'm not always playing Cleveland. Third slot we've gone for the aiming systems mod 1. This reduces our maximum main battery shell dispersion by -7%. Those of you who've been around long enough know I really like investing in my accuracy when possible, not always, but mostly. So having that tighter horizontal dispersion and vertical dispersion, I appreciate. I'll put it on the right side of the screen, so maybe it's between like 510 meters, 511 meters. I'm getting tighter shell groupings when you're dealing with destroyers or submarines, like in the previous battle highlight we did with Cleveland. You do get a slight buff to your secondary battery, but it's nothing to write home about. Other commanders, you may find that it's a bit frustrating to have that 18-second 180-degree turn time. Then I would say try out main battery mod 2. Just know you won't have quite as accurate guns. I mean, 5 to 10 meters is not huge, but I just like anything that helps, and having that -7% shell dispersion. So you can try out main battery mod 2, see if this is something you would much prefer have versus the aiming systems mod 1. Fourth slot, propulsion mod 1. Definitely, first and foremost, this is what I would recommend. This time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating, -50%. So it helps when you're having the juke shells, you know, the longer ranges, things like that. So I think this in general, Cleveland really benefits from the propulsion mod 1. We're not doing anything like a lighthouse build with Cleveland. It would be very difficult to pull that off with Cleveland. Not impossible, but she's not the best role for it. You know, if you forsake concealment, then like, well, let's do steering gears mod 1 here, or we would just take the steering gears in mod 2 in slot 5. I think most commanders are going to benefit just from taking propulsion mod 1 first and foremost. Fifth slot, we take the concealment system mod 1. So we have max conceal even on our commander, which gets us down to that 9.3. It's also reducing detectability range by air, and dispersion of shells fired by enemies attacking our ship plus 5%. So that is helpful to have here. Can't really bring myself to recommend anything else, and there's like, unless there's someone who's like just really sweaty and wants to try a lighthouse build, then you'd go for steering gears mod 2. You're in the fifth slot. Alright, moving on, let's talk about that armament now. Without anything like inertia fuse, high explosive shells, you have a 12% fire chance, 2,200 damage. We can bump up the fire chances here with those 2 combat signals to 13%, then take Demolition Expert, whatever it's called now, maybe it's still called that, would bump us up to 14%. So I think we'll just, yeah, it's still Demolition Expert. You never know, they just kept changing the names around. So you could have a 14% there as well if you really want to build into your fire potential. 812 meters second initial velocity of the shells. Armor piercing shells, they have a bit slower initial velocity, so do keep that in mind. It's not like insanely different, but you'd have to be paying attention very closely to notice, but you have a maximum damage of 3,200 damage with the AP. So when you do get, cruisers or even battleships go broadside to you, you really do want to be taking advantage of armor piercing. Like, if you set a fire, then switch to AP. So that's what I would recommend here. Your ASW, super helpful here. It has a 7-kilometer range and 2 available flights, number of attacking aircraft in an attacking flight, 1, 2 bombs per payload. So actually, the ASW here is improved over the Helena. You have a larger drop zone because I think it's just 2 bombs. I think Helena, I think it just only drops 1. Now this is an update 13.0. Things are going to be changing with some numbers you're going to be seeing here on the screen in updates 13.1, 13.2, as Wargaming makes changes to aircraft and submarines with another rework coming again. But I really appreciate having the depth charge airstrike versus ship-based depth charges, because in like the game I just featured with Cleveland, we totally would have died as it was Cleveland versus 2 submarines, right? So that was a fun game, but not at the very beginning was a bit painful. Looking at consumables, so this is the mistake I was talking about I made in that game. We blew our DCP way too early. You only have that 5-second action time, so I thought I would be fine, and I totally just didn't check myself. So we did end up taking some torpedoes as we were trying to get the homing off of us, so we ended up flooding for a bit, and you have no repair party here on Cleveland. So what you have is what you get, so that's kind of why you want to really build in your survivability and then even in your commander. It has a cooldown time of 60 seconds. Your high degree search is improved over Helena, so you have a 3.5 detection of torpedoes, 5 km of enemy ships, submarines at their maximum depth, 2 km, 100-second action time, cooldown time of 120 seconds. Now we can take the Sierra Bravo combat signal. Just going to bump our action time up to 110 seconds. We could take November Foxtrot and reduce our cooldown time to 114 seconds versus 120. Here in this slot, you have surveillance radar, fighter, spotting aircraft. If you take spotting aircraft, people will reach through the screen, or I might personally reach through the screen and slap you. Really, this is what Cleveland's all about. If you're wanting to play further at range or something, I would like just play the Russian cruisers as an example. There's other cruisers in the game. Take the French cruisers, right? Cleveland is a ship that plays around the caps, capture zones, key areas on the map, using her 9-kilometer radar, which currently has an action time of 27 seconds without any special upgrades. The cooldown time of 120 seconds, and we only get 3 of them, unless we build into it with Superintendent. So then again, we take the November Foxtrot, action time 114 seconds. And then we have our defensive AA fire consumable, plus 50% continuous damage, and plus 300% shell explosion damage. So nice that you don't have to like swap that out for like one of these two. Some classes you do, but it's nice not to see that here. So overall, Cleveland's still a really good ship. She has a nice reload time, but of course, one of her weaknesses is when you lose HP, you're just not going to get it back unless you're playing like Arms Race or some other gimmick game mode that has the repair party for it. But really, surveillance radar is really what you want to be taking here. In terms of combat signals, this would be pretty typical of what I would run here in these 8. Going into looking at our commander, so you can see this is the start out of a 10-point build that I have on here. So I'll reference this. I'll show you the build that I probably would like to run. I'm a little different once I get up to Cleveland, because versus the Helena, our high explosive pins 30mm, pins higher, thicker armor than what Helena does. Okay, so this is going to play into one of the skills that I personally like to take, but others may differ, and I'll show a different build with that in mind. First, you really want to take a last stand. The ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. Very important to have on the light cruisers here in World of Warships. 3-point commander. Most light cruiser commanders are going to want to take priority target. Now, there is, you could make a suggestion for just taking incoming fire alert. But if you really struggle with the map awareness, situational awareness, or you kind of sleeping at the keys, as it were, then maybe you want priority targets to know if there's some ships targeting you, if you need to disengage, as like 3, 4, 5, 6 ships are targeting you, then you need to disengage and try to go dark, where you won't get that with incoming fire alert. But I'll talk about this skill. 6-point commander, adrenaline rush. So as your ship loses hit points, your main battery reload time is going to be going faster. So like 6.5 to 6.4, 6.3, 6.2, 6.1. This depends on how much health you have. Then you get a little bit of other buffs with the airstrike armor reload time, secondary battery reload time, and a little bump up on the continuous AA damage. Then for a 10-point build, Consumables Expert, ship's detectability range -10%. So that gets us much closer to that radar, at that 9-kilometer radar. So you just only have a 0.3 kilometer gap. So I like playing around the radar build with islands and smoke screens of teammates when possible, to help me get closer to those key objective areas and not putting myself, if I can help it, in a vulnerable position. But with some range, you know, you could be as safe as a bird and just have a sub just surface next to you and shotgun you, right? Like, that's World of Warships as of update 13.0. So after this, what would I recommend? Myself, I'm going to take Superintendent. I'm going to show you the build I'm taking, would take for a 21-point build, Cleveland. This is going to give you 4 radars, 5 defensive AAs, and 4 hydroacoustic searches. Otherwise, it's 3, 4, 3. I am a cruiser player. I typically live through the last half of the battle. If I died a lot, or if I was just a super aggressive player, I probably wouldn't take Superintendent, just because I'm not getting those additional consumables utilized. So I would be, for myself, because of my playstyle, I want to play more for the long run and have the impact. Cruisers have more impact in World of Warships in the last half of the game, as battleships and maybe some destroyers have been killed. The presence of a cruiser is felt much, much more in the last half of the game. Okay, that's just a general truth is how I would phrase that. Okay. After that, with the 16-point commander, I take Survivability Expert. So hit points 36,900. Then we bump up to 40,500. I think this is just a little bit more needed because of not having the repair party on Cleveland. So what you see is what you get. So that, for me, is something that I would very much like to be running here on Cleveland. After that, 20-point commander, I intend to take the IFHE, the inertia fuse for HE shells. What this does is your main battery HE shell armor penetration capacity plus 25%. Also for your secondary batteries, they get a bump up, but it does come with the cost that you lose out on your fire damage. Well, chances of causing a fire, without the modifiers applied, are reduced by half. So right now you can see our fire chance is 13%. I take this, cut, it is now 7%, okay? But you see the armor penetration capacity plus 7. So we go from 30 millimeter armor capacity to 37 millimeter penetration capacity. Most ships you're seeing at the higher tiers are really covered in 32 millimeter, tier 8, tier 9, tier 10. You know, there are fire spamming cruisers. I mean, you can definitely make this a line of fire spamming cruiser, and that will be the other build I'll show you here. But I like the raw damage. I like asserting my authority, as I've done that with light cruisers and taking IFHE, the American light cruisers, from tier 8 and tier 10, and then just have players in chat like, dude, are you running IFHE? Like, I am just melting here. It's like, yes. Well, yes, I am. So I am a fan of just running that damage versus kind of like, I don't know, maybe the RNG, just like, you know, at some point you will get a fire started, you have that fire ticking, but it's not like you don't have any chance of your fire starting. It's just reduced from 14% to 7% in this scenario. Then after this, we could look at taking maybe Consumable Specialists. Our Consumables is going to come off reload time that much more quickly. Or we could look at the Grease the Gears. So now our main battery turret traverse speed is 15.7 seconds. That is definitely an option there. So in general, this is probably like, this would be one build I would look at. Now the other thing I would actually probably make a change on here is taking incoming fire alert, which is a warning about a salvo fire at your ship from a distance more than 4.5 kilometers. I've been playing more and more cruisers, so I'm getting a little comfortable where I don't necessarily need party target. Of course it's great to have, but I don't feel like it's as important for me as when I first started playing World of Warships the first 2-3 years, as I was like figuring things out. So I myself would drop party target, and I would take consumable enhancements because I'm going to get plus 10% action time on my radar and my hydroacoustic search. So the radar, we had, if we took the special upgrade, that was 32.4. And then if I go times 1.10, now we have a 35.6 second action time on the radar. And then we're going to have a slightly longer hydroacoustic search time, 110. Should just be adding 121 second action time on the hydro. So that's nice, and so that's probably what I would actually end up doing here, is just giving up priority target and taking consumable enhancements, as long as I have the incoming fire alert. But while I'm doing this build, because we're not there yet, and I want to try to utilize what points I have that I'll be building up here on this commander, kind of going into these, and then I'll reset and pick up the incoming fire alert and just swapping that out with consumables enhancements. Now, if you're a traditional cruiser commander player, you don't want to lose the fire chance, right? I totally get it. So what I would probably say is you have some room for discernment here, but I would say definitely start here, and then it's going to be kind of up to you where it goes from here, right? So you could take the consumables enhancement, still get that longer radar, that longer hydroacoustic search time. It could be that you take the focus fire training, so your airstrike armament reload time is reduced. So actually you're going to be able to deal with submarines a little bit better. So now instead of 30 seconds, it's 25.5 seconds. You get a better, another shell explosion in your A salvos. Your priority sector reinforcement is going to bump up to 25%. So from 50% to 75%, right? And then you get a 1.5% plus damage caused with a priority sector activated. So then, yeah, I would be like, with subs and more in the game now, with this type of more fire-focused build, I probably would lean a little bit more towards this, just so I'm punishing the submarines a little bit more, as they're maybe harassing my teammates in a key capture zone area, and then just do something like that as an example. So this would be more like a fire type, more fire-focused build. Fire chances of causing fires. Then you could drop priority target, and then you could take that, right? And then you have another 2 points. You can swap priority target for consumable enhancements. It's really up to you how you would want to flex that, but this would be something I would consider more for like a per se traditional build. Then you could talk about, well, maybe I really want to build into an AA build. It means you'd be giving up survivability expert, unless you don't feel like you need the additional consumables. Then you could do something like that, or you could do it like that if you wanted to go for more of a buff to your AA, because you can see the rating go up, right? So you're 78 to 79 to 86. So those would be the 3 builds that I would highlight here. So it's up to you. Myself, I quite like the IFHE here on these cruisers, and then I would just flip priority target for consumable enhancements, and then would be doing like probably something, I'd be doing that, excuse me, yeah, so like that. Or if I want to keep my priority target, then I just go like this. I might change my mind, and this is what it looks like when I do finally get a 21 point build on Cleveland. I'm not always playing Cleveland a lot, it's been a while, but so really up to you. So I hope this video has been helpful for you today in going over Cleveland. Let me know what you run on your Cleveland. I like this Tier 8 cruiser. I feel like it's done decently well, standing the test of the time since she's been introduced into the game. But of course, more overmatch at the higher tiers means she doesn't shine quite as bright as she used to here in the game. So if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Shout out and thanks to all my Patreon supporters. So until next time, take care.